At the end of this month, there are big changes coming to US imports, and there's a lot of confusion about what it means to small businesses that sell to consumers in the States. I've read a bunch of articles, including the official White House executive order, in an attempt to find out exactly what's happening, and I wanted to share it here. The first thing to say is that there is a decent amount of ambiguity and a high likelihood that things will change again in the near future, but it's good to know where we stand at the moment. Over the last 6 months, you'll have heard a lot about tariffs. The change at the end of this month is related to tariffs, but the actual change is to something called the de minimis exception. It's essentially a threshold for imports below which there are no import duties to pay, and it changes at the end of the month for all imports into the US. Where we were. I've been shipping pots to the USA for the best part of a decade now, and the whole time the thresholds have been set at a generous $800. That means any parcel I sent with a declared value of less than $800, which is pretty much everything I've ever sent, will go straight through customs without a fee being applied. This threshold was increased from $200 in 2016. For comparison, in the UK the de minimis threshold is £135, and in Australia and New Zealand it's $1,000. This is a threshold for a certain type of tax, but it isn't the only tax that can be levied on imports. In the UK, we have VAT, which stands for Value Added Tax, of 20%, which is applied to gifts over £39 and all value of imports. In theory, the UK government now expects international sellers to register with the UK and prepay the VAT at the point of sale, which means no additional fees will be charged at the border, but in reality this is only done by larger retailers and marketplaces. When the fees aren't paid prior to the parcel arriving, we will get a card or an email from the courier explaining what we have to pay, and we will be charged the VAT and a handling fee. In some other countries, like Australia and New Zealand, they have GST, which is Goods and Services Tax, which seems closer to America's sales tax. This is a tax on the final sale rather than at every stage of the manufacturing like VAT, which will be applied to any import below the de minimis. This means that in the other countries mentioned, there can be a fee to pay even if the de minimis isn't reached. This doesn't seem to be true in the US. Sales tax in the US seems confusing and arbitrary from here, with each state applying the tax differently, so I'm a little unsure as to how it works in practice, but it does seem that there's no sales tax applied to imports, and everything under the $800 de minimis threshold will arrive without additional fees. In comparison to the rest of the world, American customs have been pretty generous up to this point. What's changing? On the 29th of August 2025, the de minimis exemption will be entirely removed from imports into the US. This means there will be a duty to pay on every import of any value coming from any country outside the US. This is a tax that's being charged by the US government, and it will be paid by the US citizens who are importing the goods. Hopefully there's been enough discussion of tariffs that everyone is clear about that now, but it's worth repeating that the person receiving the goods is the one that pays. A tariff is a tax on the citizens of the country applying the tariff. In this case, the US government is taxing US citizens. The tariffs aren't paid by the country sending the goods. In theory, the tax should be based on the tariff rate that has been imposed or agreed by the Trump administration. This is good news for the UK as we have the relatively low rate of 10%. So an order with a value of $100 sent from the UK would have an additional $10 tax applied to it. The agreed tariff rates so far vary from 10 to 30% and go up to 50% for some countries who haven't made a deal yet. These are much higher than the kind of import duty rates that a country like the UK will charge, which vary across product types and average a couple of percent overall. This means there should be a 10 to 50% tax applied to low-value imports into the US, where there used to be no additional charge at all. At the low end, this is actually lower than most of the rest of us are used to paying for imports, but will still feel like a dramatic shift from not paying anything. That would be bad enough, but there's another aspect of the White House announcement, and this is the part that's really confusing to me. There is also the option for shipping companies to charge a fixed rate duty instead. The fixed rates are $80 per parcel from countries with a tariff rate below 16%, $160 per parcel from a country with a tariff between 16 and 25%, and $200 per parcel from countries with a tariff rate above 25%. This is obviously a much higher fee than the majority of de minimis parcels would be charged if the tariff rate was applied. Under this system, every single parcel from the UK would be charged at $80, a fee that would only be reached under the 10% tariff once the order value was $800. The majority of my orders into the US have a value below $80, so under this system the tax rate will be over 100%. This option is only available to the couriers for 6 months before they have to use the ad valorem percentage duty calculation. Whichever option they use, it must be applied to all the parcels they handle, and they're not allowed to change it more than once a month. What I'm not clear on at this point is why any courier would want to use the second system. It doesn't seem any more efficient, as customer information should be supplied to them electronically, making it just as easy to charge the correct amount, and I don't think they get to keep the difference in money charged. If anything, it seems like it would be more of a hassle for them if they charge the higher amount, as they're less likely to be paid on lower value shipments and more likely to have to hold on to parcels before returning to sender. Where do we go from here? Obviously, this isn't good news for businesses who sell lower value items into the US. It also isn't good news for US customers. The first thing to say is that we still have a few weeks before this kicks in. If you can get an order delivered to the States before then, you can skip the issue for that parcel. So I'm prioritising getting US pottery orders done and sent as quickly as I possibly can. If you're an American customer and want any of my pottery tools, please order ASAP and I'll get them shipped with hopefully enough time to arrive before it's an issue. So far, I've not seen any indication from any couriers whether they'll be using the calculated rate or the flat fee, so I don't have enough information to make a definitive recommendation here. But I can tell you what I'll be doing and my logic for it, which is that I'll carry on using Royal Mail, who will pass the order over for delivery by USPS. I'm not sure if they're more or less likely to be overwhelmed by the number of transactions they now have to process, and I don't feel like any of the couriers are fully prepared. But my main argument for using Royal Mail and USPS is the returns policy when duties are unpaid. This may change given the number of parcels that this is about to be an issue for, but in all my previous orders that were unpaid, uncollected or undeliverable, Royal Mail will return to the sender for free. This isn't true of other couriers. FedEx tried to charge me 10 times the outbound shipping cost for the return journey when an order was uncollected. They later refunded the overcharge, but still charged for the return, which left me doubly out of pocket. This could be a major factor if dozens of orders are returned at once. For larger orders, I prefer to send in several smaller boxes, as it makes it easier to pack the pieces to survive the journey. This would be a big problem if the recipients had to pay $80 per box, so I'm talking to Royal Mail to make sure I have the option to send heavier parcels. The standard weight limit for Tracked International is 2 kilograms, but it can be increased to more like 30 kilograms. And there is the option to lie on customs forms and declare an order to be a low-value gift. But this does open up potential legal issues for you as the person lying on the form, so I wouldn't recommend it. A lot of small businesses are just turning off the option for shipping to the US, at least until there's more clarity about how this will be implemented. I won't be doing this, but I will be adding more information on my checkout page to make sure that customers from the US are clear about the potential fees when they purchase from me. This is very much a developing story, and the details might change at any point. If you've seen anything that contradicts anything I said here, please leave a comment and let me know. And if you are affected by this, please let me know how you're going to change your business or shopping habits as a result. Talk to you in the next video.